Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on Are You Ready for M2M, the next ubiquitous technology. My name is Ashwani Mishra and I'm with the editorial team at Economic Times CIO. I will be moderating this session and I hope that it is worth your time and there are some key learnings that you can take away from here. Before I set the context of the webinar, I want to introduce our two senior speakers for this session who will be sharing their insights and views on the topic. We have with us Dan McBride, who is the Senior Director of Marketing at Aeris Communication. Dan has over 20 years of experience in the networking industry, spanning marketing, product management, systems engineering, and business development roles. Prior to Aeris, Dan was VP of Marketing at LTE Gateway Provider Stoke. He has also held a range of marketing and business development roles at Silicon Valley startups. Our second speaker for the afternoon is Himanshu Melwani, who is the Product Head Enterprise Solutions at Airtel Business. Himanshu is responsible for driving growth and profitability in M2M, enterprise mobility, digital engagement, and collaboration services across government and enterprise verticals at Airtel. Welcome, Dan and Himanshu. We are now good to begin. Machine-to-machine or M2M technology enables two-way communication between devices and is significantly impacting organizations across all industries, including healthcare, environmental services, retail, manufacturing, automotive, and more. It is expanding from its behind-the-scenes origins into a consumer-facing present and future. Connected devices will benefit everyone who uses them for finding, tracking, monitoring, and managing assets remotely. In addition, there is real value to business, consumers, and government in connecting devices to create new revenue opportunities, differentiate their brands, save time, increase convenience, cost reduction, and increased accuracy. Some of the key takeaways that we want you to obtain from this webinar is around growth drivers for M2M, M2M potential and the industries that are adopting it, security and privacy concerns, and role of telecom players in enabling the M2M ecosystem. With this background, I will now invite Dan McBride to share his views on the impact of M2M and the Internet of Things on businesses. He will be followed by Himanshu, who will share an Indian perspective and a couple of case studies on the topic. Before I hand over to Dan, I have a request to make. It will be great if you can save the questions for the end, only once our two speakers have finished sharing their views. Thank you, and over to you, Dan.
This is Dan McBride speaking from Aeris Communications. I'm very happy to be in Delhi this week, meeting with a variety of folks on M2M and IoT and what it means for them and how we might be able to help. With just 30 minutes to go through, we'll just sort of get into the material straight away. I'm sure that most of you have seen in the papers locally. It was certainly covered very widely in the United States that Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in Silicon Valley. The upper left picture on your screen is Prime Minister Modi speaking with Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, and then down below he was speaking with a host of folks in the HP Pavilion. That's a big arena in San Jose, California, which is literally 2 miles from our office. So lots of excitement, and clearly Prime Minister Modi is trying to engage both Silicon Valley, both technology for the transformation of India, and clearly M2M and IoT has a place in that. And if you look everywhere, the spotlight is being thrown onto connected devices, and connected devices really are at the heart of machine-to-machine and of the Internet of Things. And in Modi's speech about Dream of Digital India, there are several things in his list of items that speak directly to connected devices, whether it be for healthcare or whether it be for farm to fork, or whether it's for emergency services or personal security. There's a range of applications and a range of opportunity for companies in India to provide machine-to-machine solutions and services to customers. And it's really a global phenomenon. This is an interesting chart here that we've taken from that Cisco has published, where it sort of puts into perspective the number of devices connected relative to the number of people on the planet as we look through the years 2020. So the comments from John Chambers at CEO are clearly that this is going to be a big deal. And it's up to folks like us and folks like you to maximize the benefit for our own shareholders, our own customers, and so on. And if we actually look directly or more directly at India, we'll see that the forecast is actually quite good for connected devices. So we've zeroed into looking at India. Machina Research is an industry research firm that's based, I think, largely in the UK, but they have research folks around the world. But in these verticals between connected car, connected cities, health, industry, living and working, all of them are showing an increase in growth in terms of the number of devices connected. And this is representing the number of devices connected through cellular, which is an important sector, as you might expect, both for us and for our host, Airtel. So that's kind of the backdrop of what the industry is saying about the growth potential for IoT and for M2M, and how this relates really to Prime Minister Modi's efforts to modernize and transform India and transform India business. But what does it mean to you? I mean, how does this impact your business? How do you act? What are the types of things that you can do? What are the sorts of things that you can be looking for to benefit from what appears to be and what is coming a train of prosperity? Well, in general, it's important to note that we're looking at a benefit on two dimensions to business, and as tried to illustrate in this particular slide, that machine-to-machine or Internet of Things really has two dimensions of benefit. One is around business efficiency. We'll talk a little bit more about that and show some examples of companies that are doing that. And that is the immediate effect or the immediate application of machine-to-machine on running your business better. Perhaps the more strategic, more important component around benefits around M2M is actually your own business offering. So it'll be useful to consider, and we'll show some examples and talk a bit about what is happening as a consequence of machine-to-machine or right along with machine-to-machine in terms of transforming how businesses interact with customers and how that and the impact that that can have on your business sort of moving forward. So anyway, I just want to make sure that we get this notion that there's a couple of dimensions of impact. One is simply applying it to how you run your business, and the other one is applying it in order to engage customers more fully and transform your business with your customers. IDC, another industry analyst, has done a set of studies, and on this particular chart that we're illustrating here, it's asking a range of companies what they think about the impact of Internet of Things, and this gives you an idea of where they feel it's going to help them or whether they're not sure how much it's going to help them. And I think if we looked at two charts, say this one's from September of 2014, if we looked at one from, say, 2012, the don't know category would be a lot more. Not at all important to my organization would have been a lot more. But as you can see, as technologies have shifted, as ideas have shifted, as new examples of how to apply these techniques and methodologies have come out, people are spending time thinking about how it impacts their business. And here, clearly, the majority of companies that were surveyed feel that the Internet of Things is actually strategic to their organization, not simply something that can help them reduce costs, but actually strategic. So important to try to figure out and understand why. One of the things that we're seeing in the customers that we speak with, we primarily have connectivity services businesses in the United States and in Europe, but we're also talking to mobile operators in different parts of the world as well. And one of the things that we're seeing is this transition or this evolution, if you will, from in business models, and these implications are largely due to the Internet of Things, and that is that products are actually converting into services. That transactions, when you do a transaction with a customer, is being changed into one more like a relationship versus just a transaction where money is exchanged for a product. It's more about getting closer to the customer, having a longer-term view of the customer's needs, the ability to assess and track and provide better offering for the customer. And then I would say the last thing is that product vendors are becoming service ecosystems. So and what we mean by this will be shown in a few slides, but in general, as opposed to you build a product that gets transacted with a customer, you receive money for that, the services-based relationships model, there's an opportunity to compound the benefits of the services that you're offering, or to bring in other members of an ecosystem to help provide yet more service or more benefit to the end customer, therefore creating the service ecosystem that your customers benefit from and then ultimately you benefit from. So these are implications from business model that we're seeing and relating to machine and the Internet of Things. But if we sort of drop it down to something a little closer to ground level, what are the challenges that M2M and IoT can address, are listed on this slide. Clearly bringing down the cost of running business, whether it's saving costs on having to roll a truck to read meters or read some sort of a monitor on a tank or something. That's certainly going to be helpful. Optimizing other business processes, if we can automate things through machine checking and through data that we're collecting, that's all useful. Again, we talked about enhancing services, differentiated business models. As I mentioned, companies are shifting more to a model where they're moving services into the cloud. Is a good example of a services-oriented thing versus buying servers and hosting them, or excuse me, not hosting them, but buying the servers and plugging them into your office. This is a shift in the business model to services orientation. This is something that everybody can consider from their own point of view. And again, we can become more sustainable as well. So we can have a better knowledge of our impact on the environment through monitoring, measuring what's happening and the impact of what we're doing. And that's also useful for the transformation that Prime Minister Modi is certainly trying to do for India as well as the rest of the world. We thought it was a good time, perhaps, here in the proceedings to try to draw or throw some light on the difference between machine-to-machine and the Internet of Things. And I think any of you who've been looking and you're searching for this aha moment about what is the difference here, I'm not sure you'll find it in this slide deck, or would you find it in reading anything from online. But I think this is a perspective that might be helpful to frame your thinking into how might you use these technologies or methodologies to help your business. In the traditional machine-to-machine business, it is very clearly the case that a business entity would distribute a set of sensors, a set of machines that measured something. That information was collected, whether it went through the internet or a cloud of some sort. It would come back to that enterprise's data servers and applications to help it run its business, whether the machines were the actual service that they offered or whether it was simply collecting information that helped them with their business. It was pretty much the case where there was a single collection, a straight line between what was being collected and where it was being processed and who benefited from it. And one way to contrast and think about the Internet of Things for business, at least, is that there's a whole lot more data producers and a whole lot more data consumers. And there's opportunity in this in a number of ways. I'm trying to depict in this slide that on the left, while we have more types of devices that are being used, sometimes those devices that you're collecting information from or data that you're getting is not actually owned by you. It could perhaps be owned by others. On the other side of that, there is the use of that data. Not only is that additional data and additional uses for yourself, but there's also the potential that that data is useful to some of your partners. Or perhaps there's even the opportunity that you could sell that data on to a data broker, and then you benefit from the data that you've collected. So there's a secondary benefit, perhaps even a secondary revenue stream from your distribution or your management and running of an M2M, a traditional M2M type of application. And I would say the last point about this particular slide is that while this data is being collected, in this particular picture, it's being collected into a cloud environment, there's also the opportunity to run analytics against that data that's being collected, sort of a pre-processing, if you will. That can be a service that's offered out to your partners. It could be a service that's created and used by a data broker. It is something that can help reduce the amount of processing that's required in your own applications. So there's a range of things that sort of come into play in this particular model that really differentiate the traditional M2M to what we're calling here either an advanced M2M solution or an Internet of Things for business. I think the more traditional, the technical media outlets really sort of latch onto the Internet of Things as it relates to the consumer. And very typically it's about smart watches and about fitness tracking and these other things. A lot of folks kind of tie that to the Internet of Things. But it's really useful to consider that in business there's a way to approach, a way to look at the possibilities that's a little bit different than the traditional M2M and certainly more appropriate and more appropriate to the audience that's on this particular call. So if we're to take a look at where you might look in applying some of the M2M methodologies, I mean, this is just a representative sample. Some of these are fairly obvious. If you have a large number of physical assets, keeping track of those assets is important, and if those assets are actually expensive, it becomes even more important. If there's a potential for something that you provide to be consumed and paid for by a unit of usage, then measuring and monitoring what's happening with that and automating the distribution of that stuff through sort of machine watching is actually possible and very important. So anyway, there's a range of things here that definitely are pointers for you for considering where might this be applicable to your own business, at least insofar as you're generating efficiencies within your business. We want to shift now to talking about a couple of case studies. I mentioned early on that Aeris actually offers connectivity services in North America as an M2M or an IoT connectivity services supplier. So as a consequence, we've seen quite a few companies have somewhere close to 500 customers running different applications, and so we have a lot of understanding of how these applications work, and also a lot of understanding about what makes them pay and what benefits the customers get out of it. In this particular case, it's a medical devices company. The customer name is ResMed, and the real point we want to make with this particular slide is that what they initially did the business for, the reason that they added cellular connectivity to their medical devices was primarily to help facilitate the health insurance payments for the devices that they provide to their end customers. They're fairly expensive devices. It's covered by insurance, but it's only covered by insurance if you use it. When their earlier versions of this particular device, they used a memory card that was there was a slot in the device for a memory card, and it required the user to have to mail it back in to be able to build up a case that it was being used by the customer, and the insurance company would then pay. They bit the bullet, added a cellular module to the device. It's an automated process where the device calls in once a day to let folks know, and as a consequence, they can almost count on, provided the user use it, they can count on getting paid from the insurance company, so everybody's happy. What they found by doing this is that there were some compound benefits, something that they did not anticipate when they first started. Probably the most important of which was that their business has gone crazy because they've actually ensured that these devices, which again can be expensive, will be paid for by the insurance companies. Their businesses really increased quite a bit. Their inventory management is actually in a better position because they know where their devices are, they know where they are in the value chain. They're actually providing feedback to doctors and patients more easily, more frequently, so the quality of healthcare is actually improved through the addition of the cellular module, and they've left their competition really playing catch up. Another case study that we want to talk about, this is not a customer of ours. Perhaps you folks have heard of them. Nest is a company that was started by some ex-Apple people in Silicon Valley and was recently acquired by Google to the tune of $3.2 million US. What is it? They offered a automated thermostat for the home. And why is this special? Why is this possible? Or why are we bringing this particular example up? And it's because this is actually an IoT-first application. And we wanted to illustrate what we mean by IoT-first in just a bit. But just for the moment, what they were really starting out to do was to provide a better, if you can imagine, Apple's end-to-end services are actually second to none, right? Everything is taken care of, everything works as you would expect it to, and everything continues to work. They provide great service. Taking that same model to the automated home heating control system, they have a case where you can drive it from your handset. There's some intelligence in the device to know when you're home and when you're not home. But that was the original ROI plan, and that was very successful. But what they've also done is they've now sort of shared this data with the power companies. So the power companies now have information they didn't have before about how people are using things, how much they can monitor and manage the power needs at different times of the day a little bit better than they knew before, which is what we understand is what the real value that Google saw in this. So there's an interesting perspective here that they used an IoT perspective or an IoT first mentality to completely reimagine their application. And in this particular case, the competition is not just catching up, they're actually falling further behind as the Nest devices are really taking off. And this IoT or solution evolution that I mentioned with the IoT first, I'm trying to depict on this slide. There's a couple things that I want to take away, that you are at risk, every business is at risk of being of a disruptor coming into your market that went from that used an IoT-first mentality, and I think it's also important to know that you can't sort of jump to IoT first. As I mentioned specifically, that the Nest team was from Apple because they had the mentality already. They knew the end-to-end view and how to put together a complete system to make up their product. In the case of the two images at the lower left, the one at the bottom is the reaction to the competitor from ResMed, the device in the middle. It's an afterthought product. You have to buy that product. It plugs into your system. It's not designed in. It makes a difference, and it makes it optional, which means the customer may not actually do it and likely won't. And it's just not as clean. So it's the useful piece here is that these, with the exception of Nest, again, who started from the IoT first, based on their prior experience, it's important for you to know that you have to get in the game so that you can evolve your own thinking and evolve your own understanding of how things are possible. So while this looks like, okay, you want to shoot for the upper right, of course you always want to shoot for the upper right, but your best thinking may come after you've gone through the built-in or the add-on phase, then the built-in phase to get to the reimagine phase. So that's an important consideration we wanted to be able to point out or be sure and point out. Just quickly, this slide is to illustrate the fact that the Nest thermostat is really dominating its marketplace. One of our employees actually bought the Honeywell product that's listed here at number 2 and effectively took it back and went to Nest because the experience is just completely different and not inadequate. Let me hand over for the next few slides to Himanshu to talk about a couple more use cases that's important in India.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks a lot. Hello, friends. This is Himanshu from Airtel. I'm going to talk about a few interesting use cases in India, which we kind of have seen being put into practice. Also, the reason I kind of chose these two specific use cases is to, demonstrate how many organizations, including government organizations, are advancing in the space of IoT and not just using SIM card as a method of connectivity, to send information from one place to another. So, that said, there is another aspect of very important aspect rather, which I will briefly touch upon as a part of these case studies, is making sure that this information is secure and does not breach the privacy requirements of a potential customer, right? Just picking up from the example that Dan just shared in case of equipments which are monitoring your homes, you would be very wary if that information is somehow tappable or readable over the internet interface, right? And so moving on with the first case study, which we call here a secure mate. This is basically an example of a school, and as you might have read in the news articles in the past few months, parents these days are really wary about when their children leave for school as to what is the what's up with them. So this solution was designed with that apprehension in mind, and what we noticed was typically the solutions of plain vanilla vehicle tracking applications that were available in the market were tracking the vehicle or the physical asset, and not really where your children was or what their experience through the day was. So this was a combination of an RFID and GSM and SMS based application. As you can see on the left, basically it tells you when the bus is going to arrive for your kids pickup, and then it tells you based on the established 12 milestones all along the day as to where exactly your kid is at that point of time, and how has been his experience while riding to the school. Was the driver of the bus driving rashly or so and so forth. Besides that, it also over a period of time, and this is a very important aspect of how to differentiate between IoT and M2M. Picking up from the case studies that McKinsey Global Institute has recently published, the biggest difference that IoT has as compared to M2M is the analytics part, wherein you start extrapolating data from different sources and try to create value over a longer period of time. For example, in this case, the school gets the analytics as to what is the typical long-term average of their students' travel time to the school, or typically how many students spend how much time on the field and how much time on the library, and so and so forth, right? So those are the kind of long-term analytics which really create value in the field of IoT, and based on the McKinsey research which has been recently published, the value that one can create by extrapolating these data and creating analytic input or output out of that, the value of IoT or the ROI of IoT can simply be multiplied by 2 in certain cases. So that's what we did in this case of school transportation automation or a child safety system. Moving on to the next case study. Again, we tried to pick up a case study from the government domain and to try and demonstrate something that one would think is still far away, considering the Indian ecosystem. And what has happened here is, so this is a smart traffic management system that we've seen in a state where what happens is you have three major aspects of M governance or M traffic management, mobile-based traffic management, where you are able to do speed detection, you are able to do intelligent incident management or incident response system, and you're able to do red light violation detection. Now, this solution, if you see, has 3 or 4 critical aspects when it comes to delivering it end to end, right? What is important here is, a player like Airtel or a telco coming along and bringing the entire ecosystem together to deliver an end-to-end managed SLA-based solution to a government organization, where obviously the government need is to make sure there is a transparent and efficient governance system in place, which does not require lots of field force, right? Reduces the litigation process, right? Citizens have the convenience of paying fines online, right? Moreover, like I said in the earlier example, the greatest advantage of this system is over a long-term period, you are able to gather data which helps you manage your traffic better, which tells you, typically what are the driving behavior which should set an alert, or what are the typical points on the city or typical time of the day when certain areas are more accident prone, so on and so forth. So this is a system that we deployed in one of the states and is working for them. Just as an example, thought we'll share a couple of snapshots with you where you can see, how it makes the process completely touch-free from not just from the citizen perspective, but also from the government's perspective, where you get a receipt at your home, right, which gives you all the evidences and basically tells you, here you are. So difficult to imagine scenarios, from a point of view of Indian ecosystem, but these are a couple of very successful case studies we thought we'll talk about to just give a perspective of what is happening in India. I think that brings us to the end of our presentation, and I think I'll just pass on to Dan to just conclude the presentation, and we move on to the Q&A then. Thank you.
Thanks, Himanshu. That's great. So we'll try to wrap up here quickly, just to sort of provide a roadmap that you might consider. As I mentioned earlier on, the experience is critical. Sort of getting in the game is important. So I would suggest you look around where you might be able to get some operational benefits. And get started, and then begin to really understand how you might reimagine your products and services, and considering an IoT-first strategy. It's also useful to look out for vulnerabilities. The worst thing that can happen is you're not paying attention, someone comes in, completely disrupts the business model for you, and then you're left scrambling with how to manage that. So get in, get started. Make sure you understand your market, find out where the disruptors might come from, assess how long you have to retool, and then look to reimagine your products. So that, in summary, then, just to recap, Digital India, together with Internet of Things, is going to transform quite a bit in India: business operations, business products, business services. The IoT business benefits compound with time and experience. I think we've showed that the original ROI is oftentimes not the end of it. It's really just the beginning. And it's important to be thinking and learning as you go how to compound those benefits. Act with some urgency. Time isn't on your side with respect to disruptors in the market. And with that, I think we'll open up to questions and answers.
Why don't you share the questions here? Is somebody going to take the questions right now? So both of you can share the screen space.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just
I think
read out
just
the question.
move a bit.
Read out the question along with the person's name and then answer. Can you quiet?
Okay, just from here, both of us. Don't you want to be on the screen too?
Okay, cool, no worries. That's fine.
So, sorry, we'll just sort of bring up a question here.
You can expand it also. So drag it in.
Okay, so a question from Shika Kana. Is your deployment for M2M global, national, or regional?
Then you'd like to take that?
Okay, sure. So we have access to networks around the world for the connectivity services that we offer. We're also working with operators in different regions, different markets, to enable them to deliver services on their own. So I think the answer, really, the short answer is yes. I think that having local presence with an operator in your particular area is actually important. So I think, did you want to add anything, Himanshu?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Shikha, thanks for your question. Actually, we are at Airtel Business, working with multiple opportunities, being national and global. We are also part of certain global M2M alliances where we partner with them to address global opportunities. For example, multiple automobile manufacturers or white goods manufacturers are approaching us for their long-term plans to deploy or to market M2M enabled or IoT enabled devices or cars into this country. So yeah, we are kind of approaching national as well as global opportunities.
Why don't we just handle this question too? Actually, you could help me with the names.
Yeah, sure. So one more question is from Mr. Chirag Shah, who asks, what features will Airtel Business provide for M2M? So hi Chirag, coming to your question. So there are multiple features which are available in M2M, but basically I would say there are 4 building blocks when it comes to delivering an M2M/IoT service, right? One is the connectivity management part. The other is deploying the device management capability, right? The third is enabling a plug-and-play application, right? And the fourth being, basically providing the analytics part of it, right? So, we are building up capabilities in all these 4 areas. We already service multitude of M2M connectivity needs in this country, and we have deployed certain solutions in multiple states and in multiple customers, which we are servicing end to end. So yeah, we would, we kind of do provide services across all these 4 domains when it comes to M2M. Yeah. Moving to one more question, which is from Chantel Saldanha, excuse our pronunciation if that is wrong, which says, hi Dan, thank you for the insightful knowledge on M2M. How soon do you think this technology can be implemented in India? So I believe this question, Dan, would you like to take?
So it's, I think the answer is soon and quickly. We're working with folks here in country to help bring our technology to make it available to enterprises in India. So that's kind of work in progress, and I'm hopeful that within a quarter or two that that some of the things that we can offer will actually be available to you. Let's see. These are great questions. We appreciate them coming in. So here's one from Yogesh Huja.
Yogesh Huja.
Yeah.
You're getting better there.
Okay, thanks. How can SMEs collaborate with Airtel? We're a bunch of techies working on IoT. So great question, Himanshu.
Yes, I will answer.
Shall I tell them how they can work with Airtel? No, you better tell them.
Cool. So Yogesh, thanks for reaching out and for your question. So yeah, you've also been kind enough to share your web page with us. So what I'll do is I'll definitely pass on your information to the relevant teams within Airtel. We have a special segment of business which we choose to call small and medium scale business enterprises, and we'll pass on the details to the relevant teams within Airtel to get in touch with you.
So another question from Sumit Sinha. Could you please throw more insight on your approach on potential data security issues that would come with IoT, especially in European markets? Well, I think there's a couple of things that, since we're engaging into the European market space ourselves, that I would mention, and that is sort of the inherent nature of. So I'm not quite sure we fully understand the question, but I will say that the Aeris system has some inherent security characteristics about it. So for one example, devices that are in an Aeris-based system are not contactable by anything outside of the Aeris system. So they can't be hacked from another user on the same network. They're not reachable through the network that they're actually connected to, except for the system itself and by the customers that actually own those devices. So that's sort of one. If the question is more about sort of data that may be moving to or moving from Europe, I think there are some of the things that we're doing there is ensuring that all the data that is processed, whether it be payment information or information about your business or information or data from your customers, all stays in India, and so it's not really a factor. So I'm not sure that quite captures the answer.
Yeah. So Smith, just to give the Indian perspective how Airtel goes about doing that, at the risk of being slightly technical, what we do here in India is we call it as a private APN service, which is some sort of a VPN equivalent in the internet world. However, what a private APN service does is it enables an M2M application to reach from point A to point B without ever being exposed to the internet world. That critically has two advantages. One, obviously, since it's completely run on an isolated network, the risks of being attacked by any hacking attempt or any other malified intent are reduced to minimal. Moreover, since the information is not traveling back and forth all the way to an internet exchange, the latencies are substantially reduced, which also are an important factor when talking about M2M kind of applications. So that was what I would like to say. Coming to another question by Mr. Sanjeev Kumar Jain, which is on in the school model, when you say tracking of students, are the students going to carry mobiles or some other tracking buses is okay with GPS? So thanks for the question, Sanjeev. What we basically do is the badge cards of the students have an active RFID, which basically is communicating to the RFID milestones across the way.
that is how it is tracked, and that is how you get to know a more accurate and granular information about the location of the students. I hope that answers the question. So maybe we'll take a couple of more questions.
We talked about this one, right? No, we didn't actually.
So maybe we can look at the question of Mr. Mohan Kumar Sundar, who asks, I am Mohan from LifeNet Solutions, and we make solutions for smart factory in India. Our deployments are in remote factory locations, requiring good and reliable connectivity as basic requirement. We're currently using Airtel ET for some of our deployment. Would like to know if you have any IoT or smart factory connectivity program. So, Mohan, there are quite a few ways of connecting the IoT ecosystem, as you would understand, and many times the smart factory solutions are not necessarily connected over the mobility infrastructure. There are different protocols like Zigbee and many which connect over a Wi-Fi and carry the IoT information over a backhauling solution like fixed line media or a fiber. So I'm not too sure if the premises you're talking about are reachable by those kind of connectivity. However, we do have 4G as a private APN offering as well, which will kind of help you to carry that information securely over 4G or 3G. Okay. Perhaps that would be one of the last questions, Dashmi, that we would be taking, or
We can take questions.
okay.
We have 10 more minutes.
Okay, we have 10 more minutes, so we'll take a few more. So this is a question by Pushpendu Paul. Does Airtel have any plan to implement M2M technology in medical sector? And if yes, then can you please brief us on the implementation? Sure. So Pushpendu, we have experimented with a couple of M2M based medical solutions, especially in the area of mother and child and fetus tracking solutions and heart rate tracking solutions. But these were more or less experiments with the government sector. And the results have been encouraging. What we are trying to figure out is how to scale these solutions in an economic way so that they suit the affordability climate of India. So that's the long answer to a short question. But yes, the plan is to deploy M2M based solutions in the medical sector as well.
Here's another question from PC Shukla. Scope of M2M devices in context of smart cities, revenue model for Airtel with IoT implementation. Okay, with regard to IoT implementation.
So, hello, Mr. Shukla. A very pertinent question, but with no simple answer here. Quite frankly, the government has just come out with the list of 100 potential smart cities, and like I talked about in one of my case studies, these experiments have already been happening in bits and pieces in multiple cities. There are close to 100 M-governance initiatives that we are participating in the country. And for us, the revenue model is twofold. One which is obvious for a telco is on the connectivity bit. The second one, which we have kind of attempted successfully in the past few years, is to offer these solutions end-to-end. Because in case of smart cities, what a potential user would be looking for is an end-to-end delivery of a solution and not having to run around different stakeholders to make a solution work. So that's what we've been doing, and that's what we see as a potential revenue upside.
Okay, let's take maybe one more from Mahesh Soni. Hi, Dan, you mentioned about enterprises being able to sell the collected data to data brokers. In your experience, what needs to be included in terms and conditions for the end consumers to avoid legal issues? That's a really great question. I don't pretend to be able to give any legal advice about the terms that should be included, but data ownership is actually an important factor, and it's something to consider. If it's your data, it's data that's you own the devices, then it becomes a lot easier. If you're providing a service where someone else owns the data, or in fact you are the owner and the developer of an application, and your customers are collecting the data, I have actually seen or talked with folks that believe that the application developer owns that data, not the actual customer who is using it. So I think this is an area that will take some time to work out. I think I'm sure that there are precedences in the law that are addressing this. I just don't happen to have any offhand. So, but that's a really good one. We those of us at Aeris feel somewhat passionate about the value of data, the secondary value of the data being collected, and so this is an important area to watch. Really appreciate that question.
I think there's one from Mr. Jayant Mandal, which says, can you please give some details about the volume and type of data you handle in any of the use cases you presented? So, yeah, I guess that question is for both of us, so I'll kind of allow Dan to first answer.
Yeah, so that's it's a great question. And we probably have some big contrasts, I would imagine, from the traffic management versus the medical device. In the medical device case, it's really a daily connection where there's literally kilobytes of data being sent at each session. So the amount of data is very small for each device, but the number of devices is actually quite large. They're approaching and planning, I think, somewhere close to 1 million devices. So even a few kilobytes per device per day, you need to have a fairly significant back end or a cloud-based service that can actually collect that data and keep it stored for to enable your applications to ingest that at their own pace. So that's one example. Himanshu, do you have some other insights?
Yeah. So from an India perspective, Jayanta, we are at Airtel handling close to 1 million plus M2M endpoints as of today, and and we do this across sectors, which is enterprise, consumer, and small and medium scale enterprises. In terms of handling the data, there are applications which generate more than in a particular case, we generate more than 8,000 to 10,000 transactions per day, right? And they have complex integrations with databases like the court or the insurance database or the backend database where the history of a particular citizen is stored. So all of this is done in a day's work.
Okay, so I think that concludes our question and answer session. 2 more questions we can take. Okay. We have coaching from the side.
Okay. Cool. So there's this question from Tanya Mukherjee, who asks, if M2M is implemented on a large scale in our organization, how will the data usage be built? So, Tanya, thanks for the question. Quite frankly, in case of M2M, it's not about how much data or what is the cost of per MB. In case of an M2M, the real service that a telco is providing is an end-to-end SLA, and to make if in case your solution is not working, where exactly is the problem. So because in most of the cases, as you would imagine, M2M service is running some critical business operation and hence the criticalities are different when it comes to M2M.
Okay, last question from Sanjeev Gupta. How IoT helps in education domain to reach rural India. I'm not sure I have a whole lot to add other than to say that that bringing connectivity, certainly cellular connectivity, into to far reaches of India is entirely possible. Once the internet reaches these areas, which a lot of Silicon Valley companies are sort of rallying to help supply some connectivity, mostly Wi-Fi, I should say, that'll be able to get folks in rural India hooked up to the internet and then benefiting or availing themselves to all the opportunity that provides. Anything else you want to?
Yeah, Sanjeev, thanks for that question. In fact, there are multiple projects that we are participating in, not specifically in children education, but more so in the education of to-be mothers, right? And I'm taking the liberty to expand the definition of education here, right? Where we've done some experiments with organizations like the World Bank and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Right, where what we've tried to do is, with the help of a tablet and the secure connectivity, try and make information reach to the right people at the right time, and avoid the pollution of message as it travels down the line. So we have some experience of enabling and making digital solutions work in the rural hinterland, and based on what specifically one would like to do, we could extract multiple use cases. I think with that we would be ending the Q&A session here. If you do happen to have any further questions, you can write us to business@airtel.in. It's spelled as business@airtel.in. Thanks a lot, folks. Thank you.
Thank you.